Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, and his mercy endureth forever. Good morning, honorable members and those under the sound of my voice. In our Moments of Impact devotional segment today, I'll be sharing from the topic, be careful who you listen to. Over the years, I've come to learn that there are two basic types of people you will come into contact with as you journey through this life. There are those who want to see you progress, and there are those who want to see you regress. The ones who want to see you progress will always seek to encourage you and push you. The ones who want to see you regress will seek to discourage you and pull you down. Therefore, you must be very careful who you listen to, because whoever you listen to will determine the direction your life takes. You see, words are seeds, and once those seeds are planted, they will produce a harvest. Let me add, that can be a good harvest, and that can be a bad harvest, because every seed reproduces after its kind. This is why the Bible admonishes us. In Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, it says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Your heart, which is your mind, is the gateway to your soul. And so the writer of Proverbs is encouraging all of us to stand as a prison warden and protect what we allow to come into our minds. I encourage each of you today to stand guard over your mind and make sure you're listening to the right people. Not everyone who smiled with you means you well. Not everyone who you talk to wants to see you make progress. I recall a story in the Bible about a man named Nehemiah who was rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. How he was ridiculed by Sanballat and Tobiah. At one point, Sanballat said, what does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think they can build a wall in a single day by offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think they can make something out of stone from a rubbish heap, and charred ones at that? And then there was Tobiah, who said the stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked along the top of it. If Nehemiah had listened to the Sanballats and the Tobiahs, he would have never completed the wall. In conclusion, I reiterate, be careful who you listen to. I leave you with this final thought today. There will always be Sanballats and Tobiahs around whose goal is to get you to come down from the wall and cause you to lose focus and regress instead of make progress. But you must refuse to listen to them and declare, like Nehemiah, I'm doing a great work and I can't come down. Why should the work cease? Why shall I leave it and come down to you? Selah, think and act on these things. Let us pray. Our gracious and eternal Father, we praise and magnify your name. We declare that you are great and deserving of all our worship. Today we assemble here to seek your guidance and direction as a nation. Your word declares that we must trust in you with all of our hearts and lean not unto our own understanding, but in all of our ways acknowledge you, and you shall direct our paths. And so today, as a nation, we humble ourselves in your presence. Sovereign God, we look to you, from whence cometh our help. You said in your word, ask and it shall be given. Seek and we shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. And so, Father, today, we need you to help us navigate through the challenges we face as a nation. We acknowledge that what we are facing is bigger and stronger than us. But, oh God, with you, nothing is impossible. And so we ask you today, Almighty God, to give our political leaders the fortitude, the faith, and the fervency to lead in these uncertain times. We pray against weariness and discouragement and frustration amongst them. O Lord, grant each of them strength from on high. Bestow supernatural wisdom upon them as they seek to carry out their responsibilities. Heavenly Father, bless the proceedings of this house today. We pray that honor, respect, order, and decency will prevail in the debates and the discussions. These things we ask in no other name, but in the name of Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let us pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Alfred Sayers, Dr. Michael Darville, Clay Sweeting, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, JoBeth Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Bolag, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles LaRota, Pia Glover Roll, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightborn, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, Marcus Roll, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightborn, Leslie Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanus Petty, Mikel Bonnaby, Michael Pintard, James Crazy Thompson, Aram Lewis, Shannon Don Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White, Kingsley Smith.
Good morning, honorable members. We will now revert down the order of business. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Miscellaneous Written Law Rectification Order 2024.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
Madam Speaker, I intend to lay I'll do that at the end of my communication, yeah.
No further laying?
Madam
Thank
Speaker.
you, honorable member. Statement and communication by ministers? I don't know whether to be scared or happy this morning. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is always an honor to rise in this House as the representative of the exceptional people of Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. However, I am pleased to stand before you today in my capacity as the Minister of Finance to present the mid-year review of fiscal performance for the fiscal year 2023-2024 as mandated by the law we passed in this very House last year, the Public Finance Management Act of 2023. This mid-year review provides us with an important opportunity to present to the Bahamian people an update on our progress in carrying out the priorities and plans laid out in our fiscal year 2023-2024 budget under the theme, A Budget for Security and Progress. It is with immense gratitude that I am able to report that although we face serious and complex challenges, as do all nations, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is moving forward decisively and growing stronger. Together, we are creating a more dynamic, more inclusive, and more resilient economy, and building the country our people deserve. The choices made in the budget reflect our profound belief in the dignity of every one of our citizens. Our policies are designed to lift Bahamians up, to create new opportunities and build broader and more meaningful participation in our economy, to protect our borders and strengthen our communities, and to help us care for one another. Madam Speaker, in this communication, I will first provide an overview of domestic and international microeconomic developments during the first half of the fiscal year. I will then move and present an update on the government's outlook with respect to microeconomic conditions for the remainder of the fiscal year. I will then report on government's fiscal performance over the first 6 months, and finally, I will provide an update on the policy priorities articulated to the Bahamian people in the 2023-2024 budget. Madam Speaker, I now turn to a consideration of the most recent microeconomic developments. As a small island developing state, with an economy greatly impacted by economic developments abroad, reporting on our fiscal health and performance requires reference to developments in the global markets, particularly those markets that mean much to our economy. The global economy has experienced a slowdown in gross domestic product growth, GDP growth, which is primarily attributable to a deceleration in advanced economies. This, in turn, has largely reflected ongoing and concerted efforts to implement tighter monetary policies as a means of reining in persistent and damaging inflationary pressures. As a result, we have witnessed a gradual decline in global inflation. Despite this general, rather muted global outlook, the economy of our major trading partner, the United States of America, posted real growth to the tune of 3.3% in the final quarter of 2023, and a slight lowering of the rate of unemployment to 3.9%. This stronger than expected performance was achieved alongside a decline in the rate of inflation to 2.4% during the quarter. The forecast for 2024 sees economic growth at 1.5%, attributed to the anticipated reduction in savings and tightening monetary policy by the Federal Reserve. Consequently, the unemployment rate is forecast to peak at 4.4% by the last quarter of 2024. These projections suggest a gradual moderation in economic activity in the United States over the coming years, influenced by both domestic and global dynamics. In 2023, the Bahamas experienced a robust economic rebound, primarily fueled by significant tourism inflows, leading to an estimated real GDP growth of 4.3%. This growth, while lower than the previous year's remarkable 14.4%, produced an unemployment rate below 9%. Inflation peaked in mid-2022. The current account deficit also narrowed to 6.2% of GDP, showcasing a positive trend in external balances. Preliminary indications suggest that the domestic economy maintained its growth trajectory in the latter half of 2023 at a gentler pace as economic conditions continue to normalize. Strong tourism performance was supported by increases in both air traffic and sea arrivals, reflecting continued demand for travel in our key source markets. As consumer activity expanded, so did inflationary pressures, albeit in a more subdued manner. Compared to recent experience, as measured by changes in the average consumer price index, at the end of November, the index rose 2% as compared to the prior year, largely owing to increased health prices as well as domestic adjustments to the rise in global commodity prices. However, transportation prices had a noteworthy decline, reflecting a moderation in the rate of increase in global oil prices compared to the previous year. Madam Speaker, looking ahead to 2024, the economic outlook remains favorable, with continued growth anticipated, especially in the tourism sector. The government remains aware of the risks we face as a developing small island nation, including the possibility of economic slowdowns in tourism source markets or costly natural disasters. The government is taking multiple steps to address these risks and bolster our economic resilience, including measures to build fiscal buffers, as well as exploring investments in renewable energy infrastructure. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the fiscal performance for the first half of 2023-2024 fiscal year. Starting with the provisional revenue estimates. For the first 6 months of the year, preliminary total revenue collections are assessed at $1.3 billion, which represented a $43.8 million increase over the same period of the prior year. To date, revenue collections accounted for 39.2% of the annual budget target. Stronger collections are expected in the second half of this fiscal year, reflecting the cyclical nature of the fiscal year. In addition, the revenue yield in the second half of the fiscal year will benefit from new measures such as the increase of the Cruise Departure Tax and the new Business License Act. Now, this Business License Act introduces new fees for international business companies for the first time. We have not forecasted any major uplift, as IBCs, by their very nature, are mobile. Madam Speaker, I'll share some key highlights. Tax revenue collections improved by $72.9 million and stood at $1.2 billion for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. This represented a 40.1% of the budget target. This administration implemented a structural reform in the VAT regime, effective January 2022, which reduced the rate from 12% to 10%. Value-added tax collections accounted for 55.2% of tax revenues and totaled $646 million at the half-year mark. This represented growth of $47.2 million relative to the same period in the previous year and equated to 40.6% of the annual budget target. Compared to the fiscal year 2021-2022, before the VAT rate reform, the 6 months VAT collections this year have increased by 18.6%, or $101.4 million, despite the decrease. We reduced the rate of VAT, but the strength of our growing economy, along with significant improvements to our enforcement efforts, has led to the increase in VAT revenues. Excise tax during the period improved to $15.4 million, a $14.3 million increase compared to the previous year. At the half-year mark, excise tax surpassed the budget target by some 540.9%, or by $13 million. With the sustained improvement in the tourism sector, departure tax collections total $84.8 million and improved by $13.3 million relative to the previous year. At the half-year mark, departure tax accounted for 42.5% of the budget target. With introduction of the departure tax adjustments for cruise passengers, we expect a further and significant increase in this revenue component for the remaining 6 months of the fiscal year. In the non-tax revenue component, collections were mainly higher for fees and service charges as they relate to customs fees, which increased by $5.4 million to $27.6 million and equated to 50.3% of the budget target. Madam Speaker, for the first 6 months of the year, preliminary aggregate expenditure was $1.56 billion, which represented an increase of $24.7 million over the previous year. To date, total expenditure represents 45.2% of the annual budget target. Preliminary valuations of recurrent spending for the period made up 46.2% of the budget target, amounting to $1.43 billion. Recurrent spending increased by $8.5 million year over year. Madam Speaker, key spending components were an increase in compensation for employees by $18.2 million. That carried it to a total of $417.6 million. That represented 48.8% of the budget target. Increased spending in this component is explained by higher employment costs because of planned promotions and other staff and salary adjustments during the period. Public debt interest payments increased by $20.2 million to $301.1 million and equated to 49.1% of the budget forecast. Spending on the use of goods and services decreased by $23.2 million to $251.7 million and accounted for 40% of the annual budget target. Madam Speaker, direct COVID-related spending during the period significantly eased to $1 million, a contraction of 78.2% relative to the same period in the previous year. Social assistance spending, on the other hand, rose by 44.3%, reflecting the government's broader objective of providing enhanced assistance to households. Madam Speaker, capital expenditure for the first half of the fiscal year totaled $134.1 million, a $16.2 million increase over the same period in the previous year. Capital expenditure accounted for 36.8% of the annual budget target. It is expected that there will be increased levels of capital expenditure in the latter half of the year, as several important projects are currently being carried out. These projects, primarily focusing on repairing educational facilities, improving family island airports and road infrastructure, and undertaking various other initiatives that will contribute to the growth and development of our nation. Key capital expenditure during the period included investments in other structures, which amounted to $40.7 million, representing an increase of $15.5 million over the previous year. This spending component, Madam Speaker, accounts for 37.1% of the budget target and includes school repairs and rebuilding, including schools such as Government High, D.A. Thompson Junior High, and Uriah McPhee Primary School. Structural investments during the period reflected a $7.5 million outlay on Family Island developments, a $5.3 million outlay on the redevelopment of the Queen Elizabeth Sports Center, and a year-over-year increase of $4.6 million on road repairs and maintenance. During the period, the government experienced a net deficit of $258.7 million, which represented a decrease of $19.1 million relative to the previous comparable period. At the halfway mark in this fiscal year, the deficit exceeded the budget forecast by $127.6 million. However, the primary balance, it's important to understand what that means. The primary balance improved from $3 million in the first half of the 22-23 fiscal year to $42.4 million for the first half of this fiscal year. The primary balance, Madam Speaker, is the best measure of fiscal health. That is the best measure. And it is expected to continue in that fashion. That is.
Yes, yes, and then making sure they,
it's a cash. It's similar, you know, when people talk about EBITDA in the corporate world, in the private world, that's what it. Madam Speaker, as a result of net borrowing activities, central government debt increased by $156.9 million to $11,428 million. I prefer to say $11.4 billion, but it's $11,428 million, which equated to 83.8%. Listen now. As a result of net borrowing activities, central government's debt increased by $156.9 million to $11,428 million. But listen, that equated to 83.8% of GDP at the end of December 2023. A significant improvement when compared to the 100+% of debt to GDP ratio at the end of June 2021. Major progress. Our country's debt to GDP ratio continues to decrease. Again, these figures reflect that the majority of revenue is collected in the second half of the fiscal year. And we are in the second half now. And Speaker, as is directed by the Public Finance Management Act, I will now detail some obligations that were still outstanding at the end of December 2023, while noting that as of February comes to a close, some of these obligations have in fact been met. I also want to note that these bills are provided for in the current budget. At the halfway point in the fiscal year, at the end of December, the government's obligations that remains outstanding total $166 billion. And let me put it this way, the known obligations, and I repeat, the government's known obligations total $166 million, mainly comprise of the following: $104.5 million in obligations for state-owned enterprises, of which 55.9%, or $50.6 million, $50.6 million were to the Water and Sewage Corporation, $27.7 million to Public Hospital Authority, $6.1 million to the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas, and $5.9 million to Bahamas Air Holdings, $13.6 million to the Ministry of Public Service, $10.1 million to the Ministry of Works and Utilities, $8.4 million to the Department of Information and Communication Technology, $6.5 million to the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs, and $6.5 million to the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training. Madam Speaker, I will now turn to government's financing activities. On the 12th of January 2024, the government announced a $500 million foreign currency loan supported by a policy-based guarantee from the IDB and arranged by Banco Santander, as the global coordinator and the mandated lead arranger. Together with BNP Paribas, this represents the largest debt for climate swap in the region to date. Interest rate details were not included in the initial press release, as some transitory elements to the transaction had not yet been concluded. However, these considerations have now waned, and we are able to share that the IDB's first loss guarantee solution allowed the Bahamas to close this transaction at what they call the Secured Overnight Financing Rate, or SOFR, SOFR, the replacement to LIBOR as the benchmark interest rate for dollar-denominated loans, plus a spread of 3.45%. This margin, together with the IDB guarantee fee, was equivalent to nearly 400 basis points for the first interest period, which ends on the 2nd of July, 2024. The SOFR, the SOFR, was set at 5.1967%. That is the secured overnight financing rate, which replaced the old LIBOR as the benchmark. So that's at 5.1967%, resulting in an all-in rate of 8.6467%. Now, clearly, Madam Speaker, the IDB guarantee allowed the government to borrow at a much more favorable rate and more favorable terms relative to those available on the international bond market. Like any other financing transaction, this deal also featured typical structuring and legal fees. The selection process was competitive. An RFP was launched to identify the lender with the best pricing proposal, and quotes were solicited in respect of other professional services. Regarding the use of the loan proceeds, as documented in the loan agreement and communicated by my ministry, the proceeds are not to be used for debt refinancing, but for the financing of budgetary expenditures arising during this fiscal year. And as the Financial Secretary has reiterated, the proceeds from the $500 million foreign currency facility obtained on January 10th were not used to pay a $300 million liability that came due on January 16th. That $300 million liability, I can assure you that the government was able to successfully liquidate this liability through recourse to a short-term credit line from the central bank, bond issuances in the domestic market, and use of sinking fund proceeds. Typically, Madam Speaker, the IDB publishes details of its guaranteed programs once the underlying commercial transactions are concluded. However, in this case, when the IDB board approved two guarantee instruments for $200 million each to be issued at two separate time periods, they were considered as a single, indivisible guarantee by the bank with a single set of policy conditions. Because the additional $200 million market-sensitive guarantee transaction was still pending, a decision was taken early in our application process and agreed with the IDB to delay release of the policy conditions until both transactions were concluded. As is typical with IDB policy-based instruments, the $400 million in aggregate guarantees will support a matrix of specific governmental policy reforms and institutional changes. In this case, reinforcing our commitment to sound environmental governance for sustainability and biodiversity protection, and the institutional capacities to manage conservation and sustainability financing and improving the Bahamas' debt management institutional framework and capacities. Among the environmental governance objectives are commitments to measure the management effectiveness of existing marine protected areas and complete marine spatial plans. The government also pledges to strengthen the institutional capabilities of the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources, including the development of curricula, content of core courses for the blue economy as analysis and roadmap for strengthening the governance of the Bahamas' Protected Area Fund and ensuring the finalization of other climate change-related legislative initiatives. As always, improving the Bahamas' debt management institutional framework and capacities remain at the forefront of the government's policy activities, and many of the commitments are already underway. For example, in the first half of the fiscal year, the government finalized an agency agreement with the central bank, which outlined the latter's role in the domestic government securities market. Policy frameworks were approved and published for the government guarantees and lending and on-lending activities, and the central bank has introduced a plethora of guidance documents to support activities in the domestic debt market. Going forward, the government is working to articulate our country's strategy for developing new debt instruments and for implementing debt for nature conversion types transactions and sustainability-linked bond frameworks and guidelines in keeping with international best practices. We are very pleased that these steps will enhance our country's ability to participate in innovative transactions that can both protect our environment and strengthen our fiscal positions. The details of all such undertakings will, of course, be published, as is typical with all IDB lending facilities. Madam Speaker, in this fiscal year, we are pursuing our annual borrowing plan, ABP, with deviations primarily explained by higher than anticipated financing volumes obtained from the domestic debt market, which correspondingly reduces the amount of foreign currency borrowings by the government. As outlined in the 2023-2024 budget and the 23-24 annual borrowing plan, the government established that its financing needs would comprise deficit financing of $131.1 million, together with amounts to cover approximately $2,067.6 million in maturing debt. Put another way, $2.07 billion in maturing debt, which excluded the $908.8 million in rollovers of the short-term Treasury bills and notes. Regarding how we anticipated meeting these requirements, on the external side, we programmed borrowing $700 million from banks and a combination of $295.9 million from the international financial institutions, namely IDB and the Caribbean Development Bank. Then, the projected uptake from domestic sources was targeted at $1,202.8 million, or $1.2 billion, to be derived from $967.3 million in new bond and T-bill issuances, and another $235.5 million from the rollover of the SDR short-term facility from the central bank. As at mid-February 2024, the government's financing mix included the following transactions: the $500 million IDB guaranteed commercial facility, a $248.8 million euro-dollar loan, $13.1 million in loan drawings from the international financial institutions, extension of the repo facility by $82.6 million, extension of the $235.5 million SGR facility with the central bank, refinancing of $335.5 million in maturing bonds, new bond issuance totaling $230.6 million, approximately $166.9 million in short-term debt, treasury bills, and advances from the central bank. That is the mix of our debt, Madam Speaker. For the balance of the fiscal year, the significant financing activities will include a drawdown of a $50 million CDB policy loan, refinancing of the remaining maturing bonds with new issuance and rolling over existing short-term debt. Madam Speaker, the latest credit opinions gave the Bahamas a stable outlook due to continued growth, mainly attributed to improvements in the tourism sector, which supports government revenues and smaller deficits. We expect another assessment shortly, and we'll see what the outlook is at that time. I now turn to a brief discussion of fiscal risks and what I call mitigation measures. Fiscal risks refer to the exposure of public finances to unexpected or unlikely events that could lead to fiscal outcomes deviating from microeconomic and fiscal targets. Natural disasters, for one, have devastated the Bahamas in the past and pose an ongoing threat to our country, and especially to our fiscal sustainability. Hurricane Joaquin in 2015, Hurricane Matthew, 2016, Hurricane Irma, 2017, Hurricane Dorian in 2019, 4 major storms in under a decade, adding up to billions in damages. This is why we have worked so hard to stand up for the Bahamas on the global stage and to build a coalition of small island nations who, like us, have contributed only a tiny fraction of global emissions, yet face the existential threat posed by rising seas and more intense hurricanes. And this is why we are investing in our preparation. The Bahamas has invested in disaster insurance and maintains a contingent credit line for rapid financing in the event of a disaster. Further, we are investing in resilient building to better withstand disasters in this current climate environment. We are taking additional steps, which I will detail later in this communication, to strengthen our country's readiness. Madam Speaker, we are engaging in other initiatives to reduce our fiscal risk. For example, we are advancing efforts to introduce a contributory pension scheme for public sector employees to ensure that all can benefit upon retirement, which helps to limit the risk associated with future pension liabilities on the government. Public consultation on the draft legislation for the creation of a contributory pension plan for all public sector employees will commence before the end of the month. Madam Speaker, state-owned enterprises provide significant social benefit and support Bahamians across our archipelago, but continue to require strong support from the public purse. There are some activities which are unlikely to turn a profit, but still are deemed important to the culture, character, and quality of life of a nation. For example, a regular flight to some of our small islands, regular charter scheduled flights to our small islands such as Rumkey or Ragged Island is unlikely to attract sufficient private attention because it is not viable in the circumstances these small islands find themselves. You know, this is a major reason we have our national flag carrier, Bahamas Air, whose flights across our archipelago is to support our national development and connectivity. Similarly, you know, the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas is able to assert that when it comes to the Bahamas and reach up their coverage, only the sun covers the Bahamas better than ZNS. We do not believe SOE should be shut down or privatized. This does not, though, preclude private sector partnership and participation. Instead, we seek to make these SOEs, as effective and as efficient and as sustainable as possible, long into the future. And the goal is to make them as profitable as well, where practical. We have provided comprehensive expenditure guidelines to state-owned enterprises in order to promote financial accountability and to align their business practices with the national fiscal objectives. In addition, we have provided formal training for board members of SOEs, and we are seeking to roll out a comprehensive program to improve financial accountability. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas has several initiatives which fall under the purview of the organization the OECD, Organization of the Economic and Cooperative Development, the Financial Action Task Force, and the European Union. We have several obligations as a result of these relationships. We are to undergo the second round of effectiveness review for the OECD and Global Forum's Common Reporting Standard, the automatic exchange of information, during the year 2025. The Bahamas' legal framework on what they call the CRS, the Common Reporting Standard, and the AEOI, which is the automatic exchange of information, will be advised to keep pace with international standards, and we are implementing an administrative compliance framework. These efforts are to continue to improve our rating. The Bahamas remains a member of the Base Erosion and Profit Sharing Inclusive Framework. The introduction of a 15% corporate tax on multinational entities operating in the Bahamas and generating income of 750 million euros in turnover will ensure that we meet our international obligations under the OECD's BEPS Pillar 2. I'll speak to this in detail later in this presentation. The Ministry of Finance was very pleased to announce yesterday that the Bahamas has been removed from Annex 1 of the European Union's list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax. We are no longer on that list.
Y'all ain't happy for that.
We are no longer on that list. We're no longer on that list. They call it the blacklist. The removal of the Bahamas from the EU's list is evidence of the significant progress made by the Bahamas in addressing the concerns identified by the OECD's Forum on Harmful Tax Practices and the EU last year. Over the past year, the Bahamas implemented a three-pronged approach to bolster its economic substance regime. In September of 2023, a new and dedicated economic substance reporting portal was launched to ensure the proper collection and exchange of information on the activities of companies and partnerships in the Bahamas. The regulatory regime was strengthened by the implementation of the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act 2023 and subsequent amendments along with the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Regulations of 2023 and guidance notes, which together provide greater legal clarity. And finally, focused compliance and monitoring activities increased to ensure strict adherence to the regulatory regime and international standards. The Bahamas is committed to continuing our cooperation and our adherence to international standards and best practices. The Bahamas has been invited to attend the OECD's Crypto Assets Reporting Framework Working Group, which is in its initial stages. This is a digital asset application of the automatic exchange of information. The Bahamas continues to maintain the compliant and largely compliant ratings in the 40 of the 40 Financial Action Task Force recommendations. And I dare say, one of 6 countries in the world that has that distinction. Right. The International Anti-Money Laundering, countering of terrorism and proliferation standards, that is where we find ourselves compliant and in good company of only 6 in the world. It is estimated that the Bahamas FATF 5th round of mutual evaluation that's conducted by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force will take place in September of 2026. In the interim, all members of the IRF Steering Committee are currently reviewing their governing laws, regulations, guidelines, policies, and procedures to ensure that there are no compliance gaps vis-a-vis the revisions to several FATF recommendations, which were approved for implementation since the comprehensive review of 2012. The current national money laundering and terrorist financing risk assessment is near completion, and any deficiencies identified in the national AML, CFT, CFP regime will be incorporated in the revised national strategy. The Bahamas and the United States Foreign Accounts Tax Compliance Intergovernmental Agreement remains in place. A few minor amendments are slated to be made to the Act in the near future. The Bahamas continues to meet and maintain its international obligations and adhere to international best practices and standards. Madam Speaker, I'd like to point out what is perhaps obvious, which is that all the progress I'm describing only happens when talented people put in very long hours. I am very proud of the immensely hard-working members of my cabinet who take seriously the responsibilities of this moment and are navigating with skill the difficult challenges before us, as well as taking advantage of new opportunities for our country. We are fighting for a better life for our citizens and for fair treatment in the international arena. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, our Attorney General, Ryan Pinder, well, he's still in New York, but yesterday at the United Nations, where he made the case that international tax policies have discriminated against countries like ours, stifling our country's development, and therefore are undermining international humanitarian law. That's why I had to say to the international community, yes, take your knee off our necks. Yes. Yes. So our Attorney General is at the UN carrying a message. He stood up for the Bahamas and described how arbitrary policies devised in capitals thousands of miles from ours were contributing to our country's economic disenfranchisement. That's what we do. Yes. Our government is now and will continue to be a leading voice in ending systemic inequities in the international tax order, which harm small island developing states like the Bahamas, and creating instead systems which are inclusive, diverse, and equitable. And indeed, we are standing up for the Bahamas on many issues, taking responsibility for our security and our future. Deadly emissions deadly viruses, deadly weapons. None are contained by national borders. And we know that no one is going to fight our battles for us. We have to do it ourselves. Huh? This brings us to an update on our government's key policy priorities set out in our 23-24 budget. The policies and investments in this budget reflect our conviction that in order to build enduring and inclusive progress, in order to build a better today and a better tomorrow, we must grow stronger. National, economic, and personal security are central to this budget. I will begin by describing how we are moving forward out of the fiscal crisis we inherited. I'll begin by describing how we are moving forward out of the fiscal crisis we inherited. Madam Speaker, this administration has been working tirelessly to achieve the financial goals set forth in the 2023-2024 budget and the Public Finance Management Act of 2023. We have implemented multiple revenue enhancement measures in order to secure the achievement of revenue as 25% of GDP over the medium term. At 25%, the yield of the revenue system will be sufficient to fully finance both recurrent and capital expenditure, while also leading to the gradual elimination of the annual deficit. And fiscal headroom will give the government flexibility to deal with unforeseen eventualities. In July, Madam Speaker, 2023, the Ministry of Finance's Maritime Revenue Enhancement Task Force Unit began the process of combating excessive revenue loss in the maritime industry. This task force is strengthened by the Ministry of Finance's collaboration with the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces, Customs, Immigration and Port Departments, the Department of Marine Resources, and the Bahamas National Trust. This collaborative effort seeks to recover and collect delinquent revenue and create and enforce new ways to retrieve revenue loss in the maritime field. Let me give you just one example. We discovered a foreign yacht company with more than 50 vessels, which had not paid any fees for 2 full years or more. Over the past 6 months, the task force has carried what is called Operation Revenue Fortification, which began in Bimini and has expanded to Abaco, the Berry Islands, Texoma Keys, and it's continued to expand. Madam Speaker, notable progress has been made over the past few months. An online platform was introduced into the port departments in Abaco and the Berry Islands, as well as the administrator's office in Great Harbor Key. The platform enables these offices to receive credit cards and bankers' check payments along with cash payments. The Maritime Revenue Enhancement Task Force was able to collect $1.2 million in maritime revenue in just the first 3 months of operations. Again, Madam Speaker, effort to collect what is due out there. We have the large taxpayers unit that has been established in the Department of Inland Revenue and focuses on compliance for businesses making with revenues of more than $5 million per year. Bahamians know that too often some who can't afford to pay have simply ignored their tax bills. We make no apology. We make no apology for asking our country's largest businesses to be accountable for their tax obligations under the law. So, Madam Speaker, recently, the Department of Inland Revenue experienced challenges while upgrading of the tax portal. I'm happy to report that these issues have now been resolved. The Department of Inland Revenue stands out among its peers in the Caribbean for the volume of businesses that we're able to conduct online. However, there's still room for improvement. The ministry is developing a strategy for a One Tax Bahamas portal. This implementation, the implementation of the strategy will require a significant investment in technology and human resources, an investment that will pay dividends many times over once we improve efficiencies for government and taxpayers alike. I hope we have been clear that we are committed to fiscal strength and more particularly to fairness. This brings us to the qualified domestic minimum top-up tax, or QDMTT, part of the OECD Pillar 2 tax framework. Qualified domestic minimum top-up tax, which is part of the OECD Pillar 2 tax framework. This is a tax that affects only multinational enterprises earning more than 750 million euros annually. This is a tax that affects only multinational enterprises earning more than $750 million euros annually. We are talking about very, very big companies. The qualified domestic minimum top-up tax is a way to make sure that these very big companies pay at least a minimum amount in taxes on their profits in every country where they do business. The implementation of Pillar 2 in the Bahamas would unlock a new revenue source, with initial estimates expected to exceed more than $140 million annually. Might I add here, Madam Speaker, that if we do not implement this Pillar 2 tax, that multinational entity that is doing business in the Bahamas, if we don't collect it here, they'll have to pay that same tax in their home jurisdiction. And many of the multinationals are doing business here before they pay us. And we ought not to allow that opportunity to pass because they have to pay it anyhow. And why should they not pay it in the jurisdiction in which they are operating? And so we are thankful for our collaboration with those who are in this space. And the yeah, very gracious. In this respect, Madam Speaker, we have two interrelated goals: to make sure the Bahamas captures the tax revenues of these very large multinationals doing business here, and to use the fiscal space created by the new revenue to, among other things, provide substantial relief for Bahamian taxpayers. We have issued, Madam Speaker, a consultative green paper on corporate income tax strategies for the Bahamas and engage in extensive bilateral discussions with various in-scope companies for Pillar 2 in our jurisdiction. During the first 2 weeks of February, policymakers and our technical teams participated in workshops facilitated by the IMF in order to discuss policy design elements that will inform the legislative drafting exercise. The goal is to have draft legislation available by the end of May 2024, at which time we will meet to present the budget proposals for the upcoming 2024-25 fiscal year. We hope to speak to that during the budget period. We intend to issue the draft for public consultation over the summer months, that is the legislation that we'll have ready by May, and then move to finalize the documents for submission to Parliament right after the summer recess. We are reviewing options that will entail the Pillar 2 multinationals accruing those taxes for 2024 in the Bahamas. The tax is really not retroactive, and it is we're hoping to create a platform and/or create an initiative where they could accrue for 2024 what could come to us, and even though the law will probably be, yeah. So you gotta understand. Don't understand before you speak to us.
Keep going, yeah. Stay on the wall.
Be careful who you listen to.
I know. I shall be careful who I listen to. I know here there has been a lot of discussion regarding a corporate income tax for domestic companies. And I think it's important that we appreciate our position here. There has been a lot of discussion regarding a corporate income tax for domestic companies with revenues above a certain threshold. However, we believe that currently addressing only Pillar 2 multinational enterprises is the proper approach. We're not dealing with domestic companies at this time. Any consideration of a wider business income tax would only happen if it is more equitable for the Bahamian businesses, and would only be done after proper consultation with considerable lead time in order for Bahamian businesses to properly prepare. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to report that considerable progress is being made in improving our tax system. Let's take real property tax, for example. I want to note that the vast majority of back taxes are owed by foreign property owners. This is not an issue affecting most Bahamians. For real property tax, I can report that billings are now in excess of $340 million, compared to less than $250 million at the beginning of this term. This translates into a higher expected tax yield. In addition, the department has accelerated in its property collection efforts, inclusive of the use of the power of sale for foreign-owned and commercial properties. When it comes to VAT, customs, and business license enforcement, the Ministry of Finance, has adopted a data-driven approach, supported by the creation of an analytical unit in the Ministry of Finance. The results so far have been impressive, as the work of the unit has uncovered multiple and significant instances of tax avoidance, which may not have enabled them to avoid the tax that they thought they were avoiding. We have uncovered that. Within just the last 3 months, for example, the government has seized over $400,000 in cash and close to $1 million in alcohol, part of a large alcohol smuggling operation. Our efforts against alcohol and tobacco smuggling are intensifying. In fact, it is believed that the country loses close to $100 million a year through alcohol and tobacco smuggling. Thus, we are committing significant resources to combat this source of revenue loss. Our efforts as well have discovered numerous tax avoidance schemes which we are actively combating through audits and investigations. We have noted that the potential loss in this area is yet another $100 million. The ministry is also working, and Madam Speaker, they dubbed me, he said I'm the tax collector, but the government only wants what the law requires them to pay and what is due, and we're going to enforce it. No, they won't. The ministry is also working with consultants to build analytical tools to detect tax fraud. These tools will allow work which is now done manually to be automated. The net result of these efforts would be an increase in overall revenue in VAT customs and business license. Madam Speaker, when we came into office, our country's finances were in terrible shape, and we faced a really serious fiscal crisis, along with an economic, health, and educational crisis. Thanks to the right rescue and recovery and growth policies and the hard work and ingenuity of the Bahamian people, and I wouldn't forget God's grace above all, we have come so far since those dark days. Today, we have spoken not of crisis, but instead about all the ways in which our country can keep moving forward to create enduring fiscal resilience, and strength. A healthy balance sheet is important because it means we can invest in our people, our country, and our future. This year's fiscal budget reflects our commitment to strengthening national security, economic security, and personal safety and security. While the strength of our economic recovery is not in doubt, there's still an extraordinary amount of work to do if we are going to bring down the cost of living, expand the reach of opportunities, and create real security for each of our citizens. That is why the vision and the policies of our government are so ambitious. Things are changing in the Bahamas. Here's just some of what is underway. A new energy policy and an expansion of renewable energy, including microgrids and an emphasis on engaging local firms and building local professional capacity. An expansion of Bahamian ownership in our economy, including support for entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and an expansion of affordable housing, with hundreds of families moving into new homes by the summer. A modern and award-winning specialized tourism product with new investments across our archipelago and major visibility and branding campaigns in New York, Florida, UK, Los Angeles. Progress on redeveloping downtown Nassau, long overdue. New commitments to education, including a parental engagement unit, more teacher training, modernizing the curriculum. Classroom enhancements, improving school attendance, right? The breakfast program for our young, and using the Renaissance testing results to design individualized support for students. An expansion of technical and vocational training, including certification at the high school level. An empowered Grand Bahama micro grant program for entrepreneurs. A $1.5 billion in investments with Grand Bahama in the pipeline. The beautiful Grand Bahama program, in which collaboration has led to safer communities. And CoLab Grand Bahama, which fosters partnerships between the government and the private sector to bring change and progress to Grand Bahama. Major upgrades to our health infrastructure. More support for our athletes and sports programs. We are on track to pave 65 miles of road in New Providence alone this year. Investments in NIB to improve fairness and efficiency. The National School Breakfast Pilot Program I spoke of, which is already giving thousands of our children breakfast in their primary schools and is ready to expand. New classes, camps, lessons, and programs at our urban renewal centers. A youth guard program to strengthen our capacity during national disasters and emergencies and to give more young Bahamians a path forward. A task force addressing unregulated shanty towns in New Providence and Abaco and other family islands. The selection and training of new immigration officers, saturation patrols, and new investments in collaboration in crime prevention. A juvenile detention center, a cadre of officers trained to recognize and manage psychiatric issues, stronger partnerships and new patrol vessels to secure our nation's borders. Major new investments across our family islands, including new airports, road paving, Nandros, Bimini, Kerala, Nabucco, Long Island, Great Harbor Key, Crooked Island. The development of our nation's blue carbon credit strategy, and a major investment in agriculture and national food security. In each of these areas, Madam Speaker, good things are happening. For example, the last policy I mentioned, our commitment to investing in national food security and agriculture. Let me give you just a glimpse of what I mean. over 100 Bahamians in New Providence received an acre of farming land to start their new farms. There are new agriculture-related programs in our schools. We are working with SPC to provide grants for Bahamian food producers. A deal was signed to restore Potter's Key stalls. We have a new food safety technology, and there is a new feed mill for BIC, the first in 40 years. I know it can take time before progress on some of these policies become visible, but I feel confident. I feel confident that my energetic team will make sure everyone is included in our national progress. Madam Speaker, this is a budget that reflects core Bahamian values. We believe our school children are full of promise, and we don't want them to start the day hungry. We believe everyone deserves to live in a safe home and a safe community. We believe in the strength and ingenuity of our brothers and sisters. We believe that if we create the opportunities, young Bahamians will choose to build their lives, raise their children, start their companies, and contribute to their expertise right here at home. This budget makes new investments toward these goals and many others. There is, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, so much more to do. And with God's grace, we'll continue forward, onward, upward together. And I'm on top of this wall. I ain't coming down now. We have great work to do. And we must do it together. Thank you, and may God continue to bless us all.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that communication be brought up.
Table the mid-year budget performance during the 6 months ending 31st of December 2023.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
What's the date there? Right here. Yeah, just go back.
All order that the documents do lie on the table. Further communication by ministers?
The communications by ministers.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Communications by the clerk? Messages from the Governor General? Yes. Okay.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to report delivery of messages numbers 6 and 7 to the Honourable the Senate.
Thank you. Messages from the Governor General? Messages from the Senate? All of them? This one? I would like to table the messages from the Senate, messages 1 through 6. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Motions of of leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Water Skiing and Motorboat Control Act, a bill for an act to amend the Boat Registration Act.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Thank you, honorable members. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Water Skiing and Motorboat Control Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for a first time and tabled. Thank you. For the first readings, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Boat Registration Act.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Boat Registration Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
Act to amend the Boat Registration Act.
Thank you, honorable. Thank you. For the first readings?
First readings.
Thank you, honorable member. Second reading in committal of bills?
No second.
Thank you, honorable member. Committee of the whole House? Third reading and passing of bills?
No third reading and passing.
Thank you, honorable member. Consideration of Senate amendments? Honorable members, the Senate has proposed an amendment to the bail amendment bill. I would like to bring it to the attention of this honorable House at this time. And it reads, message to the Honorable Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly from the Honorable President and Honorable members of the Senate. The Honorable Senate acquaints the Honorable House of Assembly that they have passed the following bill accompanying message number 8 from the Honorable House of Assembly dated 7th of February, 2024. Bail Amendment Bill 2024. Clause of the bill, amendment to be made at the end of N9A3, add for all purposes other than enforcement against the accused and curators. Read this day, dated 12th of February, 2024.
Madam Speaker, I wish to move that the amendment by the Senate be adopted.
Thank you, honorable member. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and second that the following amendment be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The following amendment has been agreed. It's been adopted and agreed. Order that the document do lie on the table. You're moving too slow today. What's going on? Move with me. Move with me. Resolutions?
Man, say stay on the wall, not the fence.
Member statements? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is well known that I am in the process of writing 3 books. The first, The Power of Determination, Persisting in the Midst of Adversity. And this speaks about my childhood, growing up, etc., obstacles, challenges you may encounter. And the second book will talk about my medical career and investment. And the third book, Madam Speaker, which would probably be the most interesting, that would speak of my entire political career. And every event, even you, is diarized in my book. And therefore it's very easy to bring those to fruition. But Madam Speaker, Miles Monroe has always said, and I think this is very important, that the wealthiest place in the world is the graveyard. And that's where all the history is buried, and all the visions and ideas and future goals are buried. And he believes that every individual should, rather than allowing history to be buried, to bring it forth so that others can learn from history and subsequently further develop our country. So I want to present this book to you, Madam Speaker. I can present it here, but I would not want to be deprived of having a personal photo with you with the book, so that can be done after it. But with your permission, I would read what I have written in the book to you.
Thank you, honorable member.
To Patricia DeVoe, Speaker of the House of Assembly, you have demonstrated true leadership, admired by many. Continue to do well. Signed by me.
Thank you, honorable member. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I will read with great pride, honorable member.
It's my book.
Further member statements? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Central and South Abaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As some may know and some may not know, Abaco had a horrific car accident yesterday morning involving 3 vehicles and taking 2 lives, one which was a young child. It's always a sad day when a life is lost, but it's even sadder when a child is lost. Our greatest resource is our youth, and they are the future of this country. And it just puts out there the cautionary tale, and I'd like to express it, that sometimes a few minutes late is not as bad as somebody losing their life. And to take the time to slow down and be cautious on the roads, particularly in Abaco, where we have thousands of workers moving about in the day, in the morning time, in the afternoon, trying to sometimes cross stretches of 60 miles and get on ferries just to go to work to feed their families. So it's a cautionary tale. It's sad. It's sent ripples through Abaco. And just know that my sincerest condolences goes out to the family, and I'm hoping the others that were put in medical care have a speedy recovery. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, I would like to tell my constituents that your MP has heard the pleas of the outages and the issues with water and sewage. The Minister of State in charge will be in Abaco tomorrow, and tomorrow evening we'll have a town hall for Water and Sewage Corporation questions, as well as Disaster Recovery Authority to bring up to date some other programs in Abaco, particularly the hurricane shelter there in Central Pines is my good colleague's constituency. Just want to let everyone know it'll be at the Gap A Gym at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening, and in attendance will be the Minister of State, Leon Lundy, Water and Sewage, and DRA. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the time.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for North Abaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would just like to join my colleague, Central and South Abaco, and extend a heartfelt condolences to the family of the horrific accident yesterday. Our prayers are with you, and we wish those that are recovering speedy recovery. And I joined him in expressing, please be careful on the roads of Abaco. In the entire country, our roads are very long and they're very unforgiving. Most accidents in Abaco result in casualties. So please, it's best to arrive alive a little late than to not arrive at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Golden Gates.
Madam Speaker, this morning I rise to give condolences to my family, who has suffered 2 losses in the last week on either side. One, the passing of my aunt, Barbara Roll, and secondly, the passing of my aunt, Ms. Doris Smith, who lived to be 101 years old. She's a staunch Anglican and member of St. Matthew's Church, and the mother of former Attorney General, my cousin, Claire Hepburn. So I would like to stand and honor their lives, wish condolences to our families during our time of bereavement. May their souls rest in God's perfect peace and rise in glory.
Thank you, Honourable Member. No further member statements? Oh, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I rise to recognize 2 sets of corporate citizens who are doing good work in my constituency, Freetown. Firstly, Madam Speaker, by the efforts of the new rector of St. Margaret's Church, Brother Hutch, Father Whitfield Hutchinson, Sandals has committed to feeding lunch once a month the persons in Freetown at St. Margaret's Church Hall, and they are to be commended for stepping up to the plate to assist in a time like this. I'd also like to thank and recognize Titan Hospitality, who have committed to doing the same twice per month on the parks, a selected park in Freetown. It was a joy to see my friend Manoli Scandalaris actually serving food and enjoying himself, mixing with the persons in Freetown. I also commend the class of 2024 of St. Augustine's College. Some call it the Big Red Machine. And I see Kalani shaking his head. The young people combined with Titan Hospitality to serve popcorn, snow cones to the young people gathered. I would encourage, Madam Speaker, other corporate citizens to do the same in other communities across this island. And so I feel compelled to recognize those 2 corporate citizens who are doing it for the persons of Freetown and in the constituency of Freetown.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Further member statements? We revert. Appointment of select committees. Instruction to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marco City.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I would submit the terms of reference for the committee that we are calling for at this time, but I would submit the terms of reference a little later, unless insisted. I do have a copy. Appointment, with respect to appointment of select committee, to consider, we are calling for the appointment of a select committee relative to crime to consider and investigate all matters relating to the high incident of crime in the Bahamas, to consider all of the matters that might be causing criminal behavior, and to investigate and consider the various ways of reducing crime in the Bahamas, with powers to send for persons and papers, with leave to sit from place to place, and with leave to sit during any recess. So, Madam Speaker, I'd give formal notice with respect to the terms of reference at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Yes, I would hand it into the clerk's office.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumpke, Anson, Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I give notice that at the next sitting of the House, I propose to move the following resolution. Resolved that this House adopts the 2023-2024 mid-year budget report.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order the document, Reporter. Order the document to lie on the table. Thank you. Order that the notice to lie on the table. Further notices? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
I renew all notices on behalf of the government.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Thank you, Honorable Member. Adjournment?
I move that on its rising, the House to adjourn to Wednesday, the 6th of March at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the House at its rising do adjourn to Wednesday, 6th of March, 2024 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Madam Speaker, I do move that the House now adjourn to Wednesday, the 6th of March at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn to March 6, 2024 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The House now stands adjourned to Wednesday, 6th of March, 2024 at 10 a.m.
All right.